Hey Yankee fans, welcome to Section 420, Talkin Yankees. Thanks for joining us. Now we've entered the off-season phase, so it may not be as much baseball activity, but of course we'll keep you up to date on the Yankees as they gear up for the 2019 season. We'll give you all the news, notes, trade rumors, gossip, surgeries, all that stuff. But we have a little extra free time on our hands, so let's have a little fun. So we all love the new stadium, but how much do you know about the Old Yankee Stadium? But before talking about history, we've got to talk about the present. So the Red Sox did win the 2018 World Series after knocking out the Yankees, went on to beat the Houston Astros, and then in the World Series knocked out the Dodgers in 5 games. Really could have been a clean sweep, but hey, look, you know, it's tough to figure out, but the Boston Red Sox were the best team in baseball this year. Again, 108 wins. They bested the Yankees, they bested the Astros, and they bested the Dodgers. So as much as I hate saying it, congrats. Now it's cold here in New York, as you can see. But the baseball winter meetings have started to take place already in California, and GM Brian Cashman has already made some moves, a couple of surprising moves, but there are re-signings, not new players. A 1-year deal for Brett Gardner at $7 million, so they declined his $9 million option and re-signed him at $7 million to save $2 million, not a bad deal. But kind of a big surprise is re-signing CC Sabathia for $8 million. Kind of seemed like he was halfway out the door, possibly retired. Again, did not pitch well in the postseason, that Game 4, but the Yankees did decide to bring both veterans back. Now, the days of CC Sabathia being a horse in the Yankee rotation are long gone. Now, last year overall, you look at his numbers, wasn't too bad. 9-7 with a 3.65 ERA in 29 starts, which overall, compared to a lot of other starting pitchers, isn't bad. And a lot of people say, how can you go to the same guy again, especially again after you didn't perform well in Game 4? But really, overall, it's not a bad move for the Yankees. He's an innings eater. He's a veteran. He's a good presence in the clubhouse. And again, just because he's pitching early on this season doesn't mean he's going to be there in September, October. It could just be a guy that needs to eat innings. And same with Brett Gardner. Now, yes, he is a veteran in the clubhouse, and you figure, well, why are you bringing him back? His skills are declining, especially in the second half seasons. He really seems to fall off the map. But really, it's not a bad deal. As Cashman says, we know what we're getting with him. And not only Gardner play a good left field, which is very tough to do at Yankee Stadium, but with Hicks, as good as Hicks is defensively, he always has these quads injuries or hamstring injuries. He's going to go out at some point in the season, so it's good to have someone like Brett Gardner who you can slot in there in the center field and he could pick up the slack. A lot of people come here at Yankee Stadium, don't know all the nuances of it and, let balls fall in the gap or maybe not sure where the wall is. At least with Brett Gardner, again, maybe you're losing a lot, offensively, but at least defensively, he knows where he's going out there. He's played at the new Yankee Stadium for quite a while now. He knows all the nuances where the wall is. And if all the other guys are doing what they're supposed to do, namely Judge, namely Sanchez when he gets back, namely Stanton, you don't need Brett Gardner to be a world beater, in the number 8 or number 9 hole. Now, they are also kicking the tires on bringing back J-Happ, or J.A. Happ, again, whichever you prefer. But then you're looking at almost the same Yankee rotation, which if it wasn't good enough for you last year, what makes you think it's going to be good enough for 2019? So there has to be one more big arm the Yankees bring in. Now they're talking about possibly Patrick Corbin, who's again going to cost you about $80 to almost $100 million, but he's a lefty and he likes the Yankees. He wants to come here. You have another lefty in Dallas Keuchel available, or you might even have Nathan Eovaldi, who the former Yankee who came back to actually help knock the Yankees out of playoffs for the Boston Red Sox. Now, if he's a quality arm, you could get him for a much cheaper price. So you're going to have to bring someone else in. You can't go back with the same exact rotation. But in the short term, if they do bring back Happ, who was very good for the Yankees when they had him in, sort of after the trade deadline, but you still need that one more big arm so you could go into a playoff round with, again, Severino, Tanaka, and whoever that third person is. And you let people like Happ and CC sort of be your innings eaters. You need those eaters. Now, we'll talk a little more about Babe Ruth a little later on, but one person who is not Babe Ruth is Sonny Gray. And again, Cashman very insistent that they will trade him, again admitting that this New York is not going to work out for him and he's just going to have better success elsewhere. And I think he would, and actually for trade value, I think he would be good mainly for an NL team. Weaker hitting, no DH, so you could get a team like perhaps the Dodgers might take him, or the Brewers, or maybe even the Cubs. So even though Sonny Gray didn't perform well for the Yankees, his stuff is still there. He has a contract that's very attractive for a lot of teams, and I think someone would go off them and perhaps give the Yankees even a single A chip is good enough. And there's a little slight rumblings that the Yankees might be kicking the tires a little bit on Manny Machado, not Bryce Harper, Manny Machado, who last time I said of the two I'd rather have. The only problem Machado with the Dodgers didn't really help himself. It meant a couple times not hustling out of the gate, and there was a couple of dirty plays like running into the second baseman and third baseman trying to trip them, which is kind of funny. but I think that might have hurt his free agent stock. But again, we'll see how that all shapes up. I just think at the end of the day, the Yankees aren't going to go after him. It's just, you have Didi coming back, and again, at some point, you're going to have to pay Judge a lot of money. You're going to have to pay Severino a lot of money. You're probably going to have to pay Gary Sanchez a lot of money. So I just don't think they're going to shell out like $200 or $300 million for a player like that who's kind of seen as an outsider. Now, Didi Gregorius did have off-season shoulder surgery as scheduled, but what was thrown as a curveball is the news that now Gary Sanchez also needed surgery. They had to clean out some debris in what they call the AC joint. Now, the only good news is the fact that it's on his non-throwing shoulder, and overall they say he should be back to the start of the season. But it kind of explains things. Gary Sanchez did not have a good 2018 season, especially after the great numbers he put up in 2017. And after 2017, they said he experienced some discomfort. They tried to treat it with injections. Apparently didn't do the job, hence the bad numbers he put up. But the only good news is that even if he happens to miss a month or two, the Yankees do have good, competent backups, mainly with Austin Romine and Higashioka. And just announced, President Trump will award Babe Ruth the Medal of Freedom, which is the highest honor you could give to a civilian. Now that we got that out of the way, how about a little fun history lesson? Of course, we know the Yankees play at the new Yankee Stadium, but how much do you know about the old Yankee Stadium, where the Yankees had two runs from 1923 to 1973, took 2 years off to go play at Shea, where they had a reconstruction period, and then came back strong 1976 to 2008. So we'll get into the old stadium, why it was built, how it was built, and some of the crazy events that happened there, not just with baseball, religious events, boxing matches, the whole thing. So let's get into it. The New York Yankees didn't start off being the Bronx Bombers. They actually played across the Harlem River and up in Manhattan at the Polo Grounds, sharing the place with the New York Giants, starting in 1913. But then in 1920, the Yankees made a trade. They brought in this player called Babe Ruth, started drawing humongous crowds, starting outdrawing the Giants. So then the Giants, who technically owned the place, handed the Yankees the eviction notice. Hey, get out of here. The Yankees owned it, considered many different places. There was Queens, there was the west side of Manhattan, which would come up decade after decade as a relocation. But ultimately, they decided upon a lumber yard right across the way in the Bronx. Now, based on the numbers they were drawing with Babe Ruth at the Polo Grounds, Yankee co-owner Rupert said, hey, why stick with the usual 30,000 seats? Let's build 60,000 seats. So they wanted this humongous stadium. And the stadium was built with a special concrete designed by Thomas Edison. Yes, the same Thomas Edison that invented the light bulb. So they opened the stadium in 1923. Opening day against the Boston Red Sox, the Yankees win 4-1. Babe Ruth hits a home run, and then later that year go on to win the World Series, in which future Yankee manager Casey Stengel also contributes with a home run, beating those New York Giants. A little revenge for kicking them out of the house. And they christen the place with a World Championship, something the Yankees will do later on in 2009 when they open the new stadium. Christen it with a championship. So basically the Yankees should open a new stadium every year, and every year they'll win a championship. See, I wasn't lying. They wouldn't put in the concrete if it was a lie. And Yankee hitters took to their new ballpark very well, eventually earning themselves the name the Bronx Bombers. Not Harlem Bombers, that doesn't make sense. Overall, the original stadium was very friendly to the home team throughout the decades, hosting a record 161 postseason games, and it kind of makes sense when you're in the playoffs almost every year. Today, this is Heritage Field, but right here, this used to be home plate for the old Yankee Stadium. And so many signature moments on this field. I mean, you could go from 1939, the Lou Gehrig July 4th farewell speech, I'm the luckiest man on the face of the earth. Again, a very sad moment, a very key signature moment, not just for baseball, just American history overall. You have 1961 Roger Maris breaking Babe Ruth's single-season home run record with his 61st home run. However, he did it after 154 games, so a lot of traditionalists at the time didn't really recognize it as much. You have the 3 home runs by Reggie Jackson in Game 6 of the 1977 World Series, and of course the infamous George Brett pine tar game in 1983, where he hits a home run, Billy Martin sees his pine tar on it, umpire calls him out, but the game got replayed later on, so technically the Yankees lost that game. And the Yankees had some down period, but then you have the Joe Torre years, the dynasties from 1996, you lose 97, but then from 98, 3 in a row. The infamous 2001 series here against the Arizona Diamondbacks with all the 9/11 stuff. And then finally, the last great moment at Yankee Stadium, probably 2008, the home run contest with Josh Hamilton hitting moonshot after moonshot after moonshot. And even though people will always remember him as a Texas Ranger, his greatest moment was here at Yankee Stadium in the All-Star game to close out the old venue. And you want a little more Yankee history at the old place? Having some perfect games and no-hitters. Perfect game, Don Lawson, 1956 World Series against the Brooklyn Dodgers. Then we go to 1983, regular season game, July 4th. Dave Righetti tosses one against the Boston Red Sox. George Steinbrenner's birthday. Can't think of a better birthday than that. Then we got Jim Abbott, regular season game against the Cleveland Indians. And then, of course, 2-1s to cap it off. 1998, David Wells' perfect game, followed by David Cohn, respectfully, in 1999. A lot of teams don't even have one. The Yankees got like 5. It's crazy. Now, as big as the NFL is today and the billions of dollars it generates, back in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, even through the 50s, pro football wasn't thought of much at all. In fact, it was college football was the thing. And Army and Notre Dame used to hold their annual game here every year from 1925 up to 1947, something they tried to revive at the new stadium. But it was the 1928 game where Newt Rockne gave that infamous "Let's win one for the Gipper" speech, which would later go on to be in a movie played by Ronald Reagan. But don't worry, pro football. The Old Yankee Stadium also put the NFL and pro football on the map. In 1958, what was dubbed the greatest game ever played, the visiting Baltimore Colts played the New York Giants in the championship game. Now, there was a field goal to tie it up. They went into overtime, and the infamous Johnny Unitas led a charge for the Colts to win the game, win the championship. In itself, doesn't seem like a great game or a big deal, but it was televised. And the game became so popular that after that, pro football then started to leap over college football. And Yankee Stadium was home to those New York Giants from 1956 up to 1973, when the Giants eventually moved out to Jersey. Now, not only was college football big back in those days, but boxing was huge. And Yankee Stadium was a great venue. Outdoor, could hold a lot of people, and 2 of probably the most important boxing matches of all time took place there in the Bronx. Now, the first one in 1936. Max Schmeling from Germany. Now, this was 1936 where the Nazis were on the rise in Europe, so this became a bit of a propaganda thing. It was the American black guy versus the Aryan in Germany. So a lot of propaganda behind it. And Joe Louis didn't really take the fight too seriously, let many say. He worked out, but not really. Louis was favored to win. Now, Schmeling took the fight very seriously, and he noticed something about Louis, lowering his left arm. So when the fight took place, actually, Schmeling took him by surprise and actually beat Joe Louis in 12 rounds. It was a big defeat, but there was a rematch 2 years later, again here at the Old Yankee Stadium, June 22nd, 1938. This time, Joe Louis took the fight really seriously. In fact, President FDR at the time met with Louis and said, "Look, you really got to knock this bum out." Hitler was paying attention. Joseph Goebbels was paying attention. The world was almost at the brink of war in Europe, so the whole world was watching. But right here in the Bronx, the fight took place, and Joe Louis knocked him out in the first round to get his revenge and kind of put those Nazis in their place. Now, the great Muhammad Ali also fought here at the venue, but it was 1976. His career was on decline physically and maybe mentally, taking shots at the head, but he did defeat Ken Norton. It's not all about athletics. The Old Yankee Stadium hosted a lot of important religious events. One of the big ones back in 1957, the Reverend Billy Graham attracted over 100,000 people in attendance for his infamous Crusade show, which was also televised. But the Jehovah's Witnesses actually outdid him a year later. Now, starting in 1950, they used to hold a lot of annual events here, and in 1958, they drew a record crowd of 123,707 people, which is the largest amount of people record at the Old Yankee Stadium. And we try to cover all the religions. So how about 3 Pope visits? You have Pope John Paul VI in 1965, Pope John Paul II in 1979, and to close out the old venue in 2008, Pope Benedict XVI gave it a final blessing. And in 1990, a major rally for freed Nelson Mandela, who was imprisoned for 27 years under the apartheid regime in South Africa. And just 4 years later, he would go on to be the first democratically elected president of South Africa. Now, in 1969, a bunch of groups headed by the Isley Brothers did perform at Yankee Stadium. But the first artist to perform a rock concert at Yankee Stadium was Billy Joel back in 1990. But after 4 decades, time took its toll on the old stadium. In fact, by the late 60s, there were reports of chunks of concrete falling down, which if you're trying to watch a baseball game, is kind of inconvenient. And those late 60 Yankee teams weren't good at all, not drawing crowds. And again, the beginning of the television, so you look on TV and you see like Mickey Mantle or someone, or a Moose Skowron hit a home run, no one's in the stands. It looks kind of depressing. And plus, in the early 70s, New York City in general started going bankrupt. You had the beginning of what was called the Bronx's burning years, where just a lot of buildings were being set on fire around here. So a really depressing time, a really dark period for New York City in general. But the man from Ohio, the ship owner, George Steinbrenner, comes along and then decides, well, why not? Purchase the Yankees from CBS for a measly $10 million. So he's got the team, but he's kind of got an old stadium that's, run down and haggard and beat up. So it was time for a renovation. So it was a 2-year project to reboot the Old Yankee Stadium, which would later be known as Yankee Stadium 2 or Part 2, however you want to call it. But the Yankees still needed to play baseball, so where'd they go? They actually went over to Queens to play at Shea Stadium. So like they did with the Giants at the Polo Grounds, they had to share space with the New York Mets. And surprisingly, the Yankees went in those 2 years and combined 172 and 150, 22 games over 500. Not too bad. And in 1976, the renovated Yankee Stadium was all ready to go. In fact, they went to the World Series that year, but unfortunately was swept by the Cincinnati Reds. But the Cincinnati Reds were a much better team back then, so it wasn't really, seen as a big, disappointment. And good things would come after that with the 77 and 78 championships. Now, even with the renovated stadium, there was a lot of talk that, it still wasn't modern enough, and there was a lot of tug-of-war back and forth with owner George Steinbrenner, as well as certain politicians, Cuomo, Koch, about possibly moving the stadium to New Jersey for tax breaks reasons. And also, in South Bronx in the 80s, 90s had a bit of a crime problem, so there was a fear that, people weren't going to come, enough people would come to the stadium, so if they moved elsewhere, perhaps the west side of Manhattan, that more people would come. But luckily, by the late 90s, early 2000s, the Yankees decided they would stay in the neighborhood. And in 2006, they broke ground right across the street to start building the new Yankee Stadium. So in 2008, they said goodbye to the Yankee Stadium grounds, the original that was built in 1923, as well as the renovated version that came out in 1976, a place that housed so many great events, so many important football games, so many important boxing matches, so many important religious events. But at the end of the day, it's all about baseball. So they had that final game at Yankee Stadium against the Baltimore Orioles. And the person who scored the last run ever at the Old Yankee Stadium, the person they just re-signed for one more year, Brett Gardner.